Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Hellboy from 2019. So, going into this film, I think I can enjoy the Ron Perlman Hellboy movies, but I can also enjoy this new one. I feel there are bits and pieces about this movie that are kind of like, why did they go this direction? Why did they do this with this character? It seems like they had a lot of investment in this movie to have two cutscenes for whatever reason. Naturally, assuming, I guess, they were going to make another film after this, but they didn't. Uh, Going into this movie, I think over time, I think people uh, can eventually like this movie, even though it does go all over the place. It does go through certain time periods. It does go through certain locations. It does have like a barrage of different things kind of going on in this film. We introduce a lot of characters that are just these, like, okay, who is this person and why should I care? They try to set up a lot of stuff, and I really think that this movie tries to do a lot of things to try to seem better than the previous Hellboy movies. But we can just say that like this movie is kind of just another like attempt at doing a Hellboy thing. I honestly think that this movie doesn't need a Hellboy origin story, but they give you that anyways. Like they basically redo the whole Hellboy origin story in this film, which is kind of just like, why did you even need to do that? Like, we really could have just had it be that certain characters don't even exist in this movie, and it could have just been a third Hellboy film instead of having to go and redo Hellboy's origin, so that way we can also, I guess, just have Professor Broom in this movie and build to their, at some point, being certain characters that are familiar from the Ron Perlman Hellboy film, or films, I should say. And but we also introduce new characters in this film. We have a psychic girl who is to be, of course, Alice, and we have a another kind of M11 agent called Daimio, which he'll have his own certain abilities and stuff like that that he'll bring to the table in this film. Which, of course, if you've seen this movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, going into this film, we are to have like a very interesting but a very vague kind of villain in this story. It seems like they kind of built this character up to be a very strong villainous character, but actually, when we get legitimately to the moment of Hellboy versus this villain of this story, not all that strong. Like, I guess since they've already had so many fighting and so many battle sequences, when we really get towards the end of this, it's just like, well, hey, like there's a simple answer of how to take this villain down, and let's get to it. So let's wrap up this movie. We really have at some point in this film that I guess our main character Hellboy, I guess the actor did have some conflicts with the director during this film for whatever reason, and so I can probably understand that. Maybe they were asking a lot of him to do, a lot for him to do in this film, and probably there was a number of other things where they were just like, "Hey, yeah, can you do all of this and this and this and this?" And like, I would like at some point I would just be like, "No." Because it seems like they're going and jumping through all these hoops in this film, and I would just be wondering what was to be left on the drawing room floor after this movie is to be done. But really, the one good thing that came out of this movie is that the main actor, who is of course from Stranger Things and even Black Widow now, like we can see where this actor went on to, because I don't have IMDb in hand this time around. I don't. To go on and do like bigger and better things because I guess he was to do this film and to be this lead and for people to probably see him in a different light or for them to have him in a full latex bodysuit can really just going like, oh, well, I guess he does have some experience doing any number of range of things and so on and so forth. So with that said, yeah, so I could say that this movie is a good enough film. People might have their own opinions. Some people may hate this film. Some people may enjoy this film. And some people might just say, like, yeah, this is my favorite Hellboy movie for whatever reason. Maybe they just like the more adult variation of a film. Or whichever. Maybe, I don't know, however you want to feel about this film. So, with that said, if I didn't say this, it seems that Ron Perlman didn't give the seal of approval for the original Hellboy or the other Hellboy remaked actor to go and do this role. Supposedly they ended up getting together and talking about it, both the actors, but Ron Perlman still didn't give the seal of approval about that whole thing. We have actors like Patton Oswalt or even Ron Perlman himself talking about it. And I think that really just stems from Ron Perlman just really wanting to do a third film. And like Bashal all everything else. Because it's just like, I think Ron really wanted to do another one of these, but I think the studio or whoever was working on this was just like, no. Like, we want to try to uh, do a remake, and really it didn't go over to just say, yeah, we're going to make another Hellboy film. But maybe they're at some point going to take another stab at it, another attempt at it, another try. But these three Hellboy movies have all we gotten, and so let's go into the spoiler version of this, because I think that's all that I really have to say. Some parts about this movie are very visually interesting. Some parts about this like come off to me as like, this kind of feels like Ghostbusters 2 in a lot of ways, like how this movie is designed. If you kind of do like a take by take of Ghostbusters 2 and you look at this movie, like there are like a lot of familiar things going on here that kind of feel similar and so on and so forth. So with that said, let's go out of our way to just go into spoilers about this one. Like, I don't think there is any much left for me to probably say. I know probably with this one, there might be something where I feel like, hey, yeah, I didn't say this about it. Oh, crap. Well, but anyways, let's just go into this film. Let's go ahead and talk about it. So, let's go into that double 5 time territory and go into spoilers about this film, because it's about roughly 2 hours long anyways. So spoiler time, it's about that time we get to spoil this movie. So, the beginning of this film is to start off in Pendle Hill, 517 AD. Here's the goofy thing about this film, is it opens up with Professor Broom talking about this story, and I'm like, so is this like, when you were to probably go into this movie realizing that Hellboy 2 exists, were we to expect that we were to get like a young Hellboy hearing this story at some point of his life and then cue us into present day? Like, we would have thought we would probably had that, but we didn't. I'm kind of expecting now, if there possibly is going to do, if they are going to have a Hellboy, I bet whoever the Hellboy actor is probably going to be a lot younger. What do you think? Do you think we're going to have a younger Hellboy? I don't know. I think they'll just kind of randomly, like, hey, whoever's kind of the successful person at this time, let's just put him as Hellboy. So that way that'll, like, maybe like a Carl Urban or some kind of other, like, actor of sorts that is to be, like, hot right now. And let's go and put him in a latex suit so it can be even hotter. A full body latex suit. So so the beginning of this is to set up that that our main villain, our Blood Queen, our for Uwimwe is, which sounds goofy. It sounds like a song. It sounds like I'm singing a song right now. Uwimwe. But man, do they say names thoroughly in this movie? Man, do they say a ton of names so often in this film. Like, how many times do you have to hear the word Awimaway in this film to, I guess, help us, like, figure out who this character is? She's either a Blood Queen, or Awimaway, or Vivian Awimaway. So, we are to go into this big tree that is to seemingly hold some of Awimaway's power. And so we have certain people that are to appear, like King Arthur, like Moses, and they are to go on and try to defeat Awimaway and to chop up pieces of her body to put these pieces of these body parts in these caskets to separate these pieces to go on to be hidden in certain locations where there is to be a character later on in this movie who is to go and retrieve them all. So, so King Arthur is to go and take and whip out Excalibur and chop off Awimaway's head to defeat her, and that's, of course, like chopping off the head, separating the body parts, and then feeling like this threat is to be completed or defeated, so to speak. So, transition us to Tijuana, where it's to be in present day, where Hellboy is to go off to Tijuana to go and look for a agent called Ruiz. Ruiz, and supposedly this guy has been gone for seemingly a long time because he went off to go and take down this vampire nest. And so Hellboy was to go and have his father being called to kind of relay that Hellboy is kind of being on his best behavior, which of course Hellboy is. He's like, yeah, I went and got certain information about where Ruiz is, and so on and so forth. So Hellboy goes into this of course, place where we end up finding out there is to be some kind of wrestling promotion going on, and it seems we have a guy called Kamazotes, or Kamazotes, Kamazos, and so everybody's to be chanting this character. This costumed Batman is to, of course, be going on and putting together this promo, knowing, of course, that Hellboy is to be here for him, and so this wrestler, this luchador, is to mention that he is to go on and fight Hellboy here. That there's to be this famous supernatural investigator that is to come and fight him. And so here's the one thing. Like, this, of course, was done in supposedly Tijuana, but I don't really think that I could really tell the difference between Tijuana and anywhere else. Like, they could probably say that this is Tijuana, but I'm not clearly thinking that any bit or pieces of this, like, feels like Tijuana. Did they actually shoot this there? Like, was there actual locations they scouted? Like, was there just a place that they just made it seem like Tijuana? I don't know. So Hellboy goes into the ring, and is to talk to Ruiz, and is to say, "Hey man, like, why are you wearing this getup? Like, we went and we went and we had you go off and go after a vampire nest. Like, why are you wearing this getup now? Why are you wrestling?" And so Ruiz is to say to prepare him for going and taking down Hellboy. And so Hellboy's like, okay, like, I guess this means we're gonna have to fight now. So all of a sudden, Ruiz is to change from a human man of luchador status to changing into an actual bat right in front of us, like a basically man bat creature-esh like thing. And so now Hellboy is having to fight this man bat creature, and so how this ends up playing out is that Hellboy goes and uh, takes this Ruiz and chucks him onto this end of this turnbuckle, and has this like metal piece kind of go through his chest. And so it seems that uh, this Ruiz is to change back to a human and tell Hellboy that the main reason that he decided to go and do this was because he found out about who Hellboy really is, that he's among Moon Rama, and that among Moon Rama will destroy the world. Hence why this guy went out of his way to try to train to beat Hellboy, because he found out the truth about Hellboy, and that he was actually to be the evil of the world, and we didn't even realize it. So transition us to Colorado, because Hellboy is to go off to this bar and drink his sorrows away, because there's another agent who is to die. So now we're having Hellboy being forcibly taken back to the BPRD, because Hellboy is kind of done with his mission, and Hellboy eventually is to go and drink away his sorrows, and is to force to go back to Colorado, where he is to go to the BPRD, the Bureau of Paranormal, or Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense. Sure it is. So now, Hellboy is going off to go and talk to his father, and so it seems, since Hellboy's mission is over and he's making his way back home, basically his father is laying out yet another mission for Hellboy to do, because it's just like, man, this guy is just go, go, go. He never stops. There's never a time when there's to be much of like him to just kind of marinate on stuff. Like, we just have Hellboy who's just shoved off to do this next mission. And so Hellboy goes off to talk to his father, and so his father, Professor Broom, is to uh, ask, of course, Hellboy if he's ever heard of the Osiris Club. And funny enough, Hellboy is to mention it's like, oh yeah, it's some strip club off of New Jersey. And of course, Professor Broom is like, no, it's to be a private secret club that a number of British occultists had formed in the 1866s. And so he's like, okay, great. Like, why do I need to go there? Well, it seems that these characters need help with giants. Like, supposedly he's going off to fight giants because Hellboy is like, what do you want me to do? Go and fight giants? He's like, well, that's specifically what they want you to do. And so he's like, oh, great. So Hellboy is to now go off to England. So we've already had like 3 setting transitions. We've had Tijuana, Colorado, and England. And the whole Colorado thing honestly could have just been handled over Skype or over a phone call. Why did we have to have Hellboy go all the way home just to ship out all the way to England? This seems like a waste of resources. But, like, I guess that's just me. So, Hellboy goes off to meet the Osiris Club, where he, of course, is to meet a Lord Adam Glarin and a Dr. Edwin Carp and Austin Swain. Or Swine? Swain? Who are to all be people that are to be a part of this British occultist thing, that are to go off and fight these 3 giants. It seems like they have a collection of heads of giants upon this one room, and so Hellboy is like, why do you even need my help? Like, it seems like you guys have this giant killing thing down. Why do you need me? And so they're like, well, normally we can go and take down 1 or 2 at a time, but it seems like we now have 3 giants here, and so, like, hence why we called you in here to kind of even out the numbers. So Hellboy's like, okay. So now we have these guys all heading into this one part of this room, this kind of trophy room, where Hellboy is to spot a photo of all of these guys and his father. And so Hellboy is like, well, I know my dad tends to age like really well, but like, why is it that you guys, like, it seems like this picture was done yesterday. And so that enters Lady Elizabeth Hatton. And so Lady Elizabeth Hatton is to be this kind of crystal ball woman who is to have, I guess, seen the future. But this girl is to really be here to showcase the past. Showing us, of course, Hellboy's past, where, of course, we get the same exact origin story of the, of course, first Hellboy movie, but we also let's back up a little bit. Also, we find out that it seems that the main reason why these guys are to desperately also want Hellboy's help to kind of quickly wrap up these giants. It seems that giants love bones or just the marrow of people, and that's also the main reason why they're going on to want to avoid these giants going into a mass of public areas. they end up having to weirdly call them like Gigantum Morpheus, um, or some kind of gigantus weird goofy name. Um, it's weird. So, uh, but now let's go back with Lady the Hatton character, the fortune teller ish like character, and let's get this story underway to showcase the origin of Hellboy again. So the Nazis after World War or during World War II were trying to, of course, win that war, and so they ended up trying to go into supernatural means to try and do so, finding a necromancer named Gregory Rasputin. And so Gregory was to try and channel another dimension or another, uh, basically hell, to try and get something from that to have the Nazis win that war. But this was, of course, all for naught because all of a sudden there is to be this supposedly legendary Nazi killer called the Lobster Jacobson, that was to arrive here to thwart out these people. So I'm like, wait a minute. Like, we have this goofy character with this lobster symbol in his hand, that when he is to touch somebody on the forehead, it's to present some lobster symbol that is to kill these people off. And I'm like, why does this character exist? Plus, also, Rasputin seems to have a number of people at his disposal that can kind of put the boots to the lobster, the Nazi killer, the lobster, and we don't have that kind of fight out. It's just like, hey, he just instantly wipes them all out for whatever reason. So, so we break that all down and are to have Hellboy, of course, being coming from his hidden spot. Professor Broom was going to shoot Hellboy in the head, but decided not to, and that's, of course, when we have Professor Broom deciding to be Hellboy's father and to just kind of take on the task of taking care of Hellboy however he can, and so on and so forth. So, so while they're breaking down weirdly Hellboy's origin story to Hellboy because he, I guess, had no clue, let's transition here for a moment so that we can understand some other things which I probably did not mention here. So we have a character from another dimension here called Baba Yaga, who is to be a witch of sorts that is to um, have a monsterish boar like character called Gregor. Gregor? Um, like they pronounce it a certain way in this film, and I'm trying to hopefully remember the pronunciation perfectly, but it's like a very goofy name, but it's like Gregor. It's Gregor. That's what it kind of sounds like. I'm hopefully that's somewhere ballparkingly correct. And so the witch is to say how exactly for this character to go on and get these certain items to, or to find these certain items to defeat not only Hellboy, but to also have the Blood Queen go and give Gregor his ability to become human again, because that's his main thing that he desperately wants because evidently Gregorsh had been tied with some fairies, and like he was kind of doing their dirty work. And it seems that also Gregorsh was a changeling of sorts. And so, but we'll kind of get more into that later on in the movie. But so, because the next thing that is to happen is we are to go and transition again to Saint Sebastian's Abbey, where we, of course, have Gregorsh making his way to this church where he is to go on and murder a bunch of these priests who have all gotten to a vow of silence. They go and they chalk away something that they are going to say here. And so some priests are mentioning that, hey, like it's too late for someone to come in here for any reason. And so, but Gregorsh ends up going and bashing through the door, killing most of these priests, but leaving, of course, one alive to drag him to where the casket is and to force him to say certain words of a holy man to unlock this casket. And of course, this priest will not do it. So Gregor goes and rips out this guy's whole jaw, basically, and goes on and is to go and say the words of this guy to unleash this casket, which this casket is actually the head of the Blood Queen. Luckily they had reset here for a second. Luckily they had a name like the Blood Queen, or this would be really harder to consistently remember this villain's name in this movie, because you could have just broken it down and had her be called Vivian, but whatever. So, but here's the interesting thing: when Gregorsh is to try to grab the casket, he is to drop it because of Gregorsh's weakness is being or is iron. He hates iron, and he drops the casket because, of course, it's made of iron. I'm like, when was it that all of a sudden, like, some supernatural characters had the weakness of iron? Like, I remember, of course, like in Blade movies and stuff like that, like, a lot of supernatural characters were to have the weakness of silver. But I guess, like, certain monsterish characters have certain weaknesses and so on and so forth. So it's kind of interesting to, like, just have a number of metals and stuff like that be one thing that certain monsters are to be hurt by, which is just kind of weird. So, man, if you're a blacksmith, if you can really spin a copper or a iron or a silver or gold or whatever, man, you can hurt all kinds of monsters. That's definitely a thing. So, yeah, Gregorsh, or the Gregorsh. So that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah. So now that we have that weirdly out of the way, so Gregorsh goes and takes the Blood Queen and is to have seemingly most of her body parts together. So he goes and lines all of her body parts up next to her in this kind of like couch. And so we have the Blood Queen who's kind of watching TV and kind of flipping through channels because she has the ability of actually using her hand. But and so we have Gregorsh who's going and trying to give the Blood Queen cookies because he's like, yeah, I'm sure you probably built up an appetite. Yeah. So so the Blood Queen goes on and is to get sewn together to have all of her body parts eventually connected. When Gregorsh was to give the Blood Queen food, The Blood Queen was to mention, like, revenge is my only sustenance. Thought that was so, like, we have this character that has this kind of language or way about her from a certain time period. So it's kind of interesting to see her dialogue delivered at some points because she has this kind of time period way of talking, which I find fairly interesting. So, transitioning us back with the Osiris Club, and so the Osiris Club guys are kind of gearing up. They're putting all these weird, goofy headpieces on, and because one of like the lead guy, who is to just kind of introduce everybody, is to go on and put this weird deer head upon his face. And Hellboy was to have thought, it's like, oh my god, please don't tell me I'm gonna be wearing a deer head on my head to do this mission. And the guy's like, oh no 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 no, like that's for me. Like I know that you hate horns, and so like that's actually just for me. And he's like, okay. I'm kind of curious how this guy actually held this helmet onto his head without it falling off. Plus, also, how much did that thing actually weigh? Because that thing looks like a huge ordeal to have on this guy's head, but I guess that's just me, right? So, these guys in their horseback like things, because they decide that they're not going to go and drive off with a car to make it to these giants because they're just old fashioned, and supposedly these guys are to seemingly have this be much more of a weird hunt of things. Like they're very old fashioned about how they approach this. I'm like, this just seems like a lot of rich guys who are to absurdly challenge themselves, knowing good and well that they're probably going to die from their next mission. Because these people seem like they know what they're doing, but I don't. Like, I could not put forth a thought in my mind to say, like, these guys can easily just take down any giant, let alone let alone the added extra bonus of 3 giants. Like, it doesn't seem like these guys are really well equipped to go against giants. Like when they present their weaponry of these kind of proton pack like weapons that are to have this electrical charge that has this kind of stick that is to be a spear of sorts that jabs into things and is to be 5 times the power of any electrical chair. Or so when like people are to go on death row and get the electric chair, like it's supposedly 5 times powerful as that. So Hellboy and the Osiris Club trots off to this part of town where it seems that the giants have ransacked through. So Hellboy is to say, it's like, well, these giants have already left. And so the guys, or the Osiris Club, is to just say, it's like, well, they'll come back. It's like, if they have like an easy meal here, they'll come back for it. And so the giants aren't here. And so we actually do find out that this club wasn't going to go after the giants. That was just a decoy for them to actually go after Hellboy. And while Hellboy's on horseback, they stab him in the back, and like a spear goes through his chest, and so Hellboy falls off his horse, and they just continue to stab Hellboy, dropping him into this water nearby this bridge. And so this lord of sorts, I want to try to get the name right. Uh, Lord Adam Glare is to say that they do not trust Hellboy, that this was all a smokescreen to get to him because they know good and well that he's among Moon Rama, and that he will be the person that will lead to the end of the world. And so they want to just take his head off so they can have a yet another trophy on their wall. So coincidentally, while these guys are all distracted going and trying to kill off Hellboy, these guys end up getting scooped up by these giants and killed. And so when Hellboy comes to and starts taking out certain spear pieces from his body, he realizes that it's like, well, I guess you guys weren't really built to take on giants at all, because like all three of these giants are just there, and it seems like the Osiris Club didn't like get one lick in to any number of these giants. Like it seems like these giants caught these guys off guard and killed them all off in one fell swoop. So now Hellboy is going to have to, of course, take down these giants because it's the right thing to do. So, but of course, when Hellboy is to fight anything, like he doesn't do it so quietly or so stealthily or whatever. Like basically, Hellboy goes in there and is to like announce he's there, and because like that's just classic Hellboy. So when Hellboy goes off to fight these giants, Hellboy is to go on and chuck this tree trunk into one of the giants' like eye or like face, and so Hellboy is now kind of really just pulling away at this tree trunk to have one of the other giants come flying in with this like axe of sorts, going in to try and get at Hellboy through another giant's face. And so this giant goes and accidentally axes one of his other giants and kills him. And so that leaves two other giants, of course, to get killed. So Hellboy is to take another tree, and while another giant is kind of just disoriented, and Hellboy goes and takes this tree and rams it through the giant's throat to kill him off. And then so the last giant, Hellboy is to take this massive sword and is to swing it around and start slicing up this giant to, at the end, kill this giant off. So now that Hellboy is all a bloody mess and is just kind of stumbling and almost going to pass out or fall over, Hellboy weirdly sees this Uber that he says like, "Oh, is that my Uber? What van is this?" So, so Hellboy is to collapse to wake up in some apartment where he is to reunite with a girl named Alice Morgan, who is to be a person that is to talk to spirits, and it seems that most of the time she ends up talking with her parents, who are unfortunately dead. And so when both Alice and Hellboy are talking, it seems that Alice to have this certain kind of angel dust gun kind of pointed at Hellboy's nuts. And I thought that was kind of like a funny exchange of dialogue where it's like, uh, really, Alice could kill Hellboy at any point in time, but she chooses not to. So Alice goes and tells Hellboy to duck because she knows something is coming, because ghosts tend to talk all the time, non-stop. So, so Alice is telling Hellboy to duck because glass is to be broken, and so that's when, of course, Professor Broom is to appear yet again to now like be worried about Hellboy, and was to kind of see like what had happened to him, but to also introduce a guy named Ben Daimio, who is to be the head of special ops for M11. And so uh, Ben and Hellboy are going to have to work together in this whole thing because they're basically working on the same case. So that also has, of course, Hellboy being notified that that church had been attacked, and of course had been taken certain caskets, and like basically all the stuff that had just happened with Gregorsh, like basically Hellboy is getting aware of that, or being aware of that now. So Hellboy is to go off with Ben, but Alice is wanting to get money for her repairs of her apartment, where she's asking for $1 million in damages. And Daimio is like, I'm not going to give you that money. And so Alice is like, well, like, it's also for like emotional distress that you caused me. And plus, also, Alice had to go and bandage up Hellboy and kind of rip some of those bandages off. So, like, she also had to, like, doctor Hellboy also. So, Hellboy is to, of course, start to walk off with Ben and tell Daimyo that's like, well, yeah, like, we need Alice. Like, she's a really good medium and she's really skilled at what she can do. So we're definitely going to need her. And Hellboy is to want to go off to go and wipe out the whole Osiris club that had turned against him. And so that's where they're going back to, because they want to go and kill two birds with one stone. And then after they go and wipe out the Osiris club, they can go on and wipe out this new threat, the Blood Queen. So so now we have Hellboy, Alice, and Ben, who are all going off to make it to the Osiris Club, and Alice is weirdly having psychic migraines, where she is consistently hearing screaming over and over. So that transitions us to have Alice figure out where the screaming is coming from to help us figure out where to go within this Osiris Club, which leads us back into that room with that cluster of heads to re-meet up with Elizabeth Hatter, I believe her name was, Lord Elizabeth Hatter, the girl who had given us the origin story of Hellboy. And she unfortunately is dead, and so Alice is to go and to project Hatter out of her mouth. And so Alice was telling Ben to leave, and Ben's like, no, I'm not leaving. Like, I can miss all the fun. I don't want to miss anything. I don't miss all of this. So Now Hatter is to tell Hellboy that Nimue has returned, and that that all of a sudden is to kick off a story about how Alice and Hellboy have met and been like good friends over the years. Because in 1992, uh, Alice evidently was taken by fairies and had a changeling being put into her place. So, because evidently fairies love to steal babies for whatever goofy reason. So, so Alice's parents is to go and for one way or another been able to call Hellboy to help them with this case, because obviously Alice seems to look like Alice, but there's some kind of feeling that they have or sense that they have that this actually isn't their daughter. So Hellboy is to have a horseshoe because he immediately knows what this thing is. And so Hellboy goes and puts a thing of iron to this baby to have it change into a Gregorsh. And so Hellboy is to go on and fight this Gregorsh and to threaten him to bring back the baby, or Hellboy is going to go and wipe out not only him but all the other fairies. And so the fairies end up bringing back this baby, and Hellboy is like, good. Like, I won't have to go and wipe you guys all out. So now, yeah, like sorry. So now, of course, we end up having to make our way back to the secret headquarters of Ben Daimio's variation of uh, his security place, which of course has Professor Bloom being placed in it. And so, and like when they start going through this place, this other headquarters, this secret headquarters, supposedly this was originally some old bomb shelter that got refurbished. And so Hellboy is like, refurbished, like, whatever. So uh because I guess it was refurbished during the war, whichever war, how many numbers of wars. So now Hellboy, of course, is re-meeting up with his father, and so while that's going on, Daimio decides to go off on his own mission to go and talk to some guys who is to put together a weapon to possibly kill Hellboy if Hellboy is to get out of line. Supposedly, this is to be a mixture of Judas Silver and a blood of Saint Dominic is to be concocted in this weapon, and it's to be blessed by of course a priest and all number of things. So this little uh, weapon that they designed or put together is to supposedly be the one takeout thing that is to, of course, kill Hellboy, this goofy weapon that uh, Daimio doesn't even really use in this film for whatever goofy reason. So Hellboy had the ability of talking to Nimue, and so now Hellboy is just starting to get frustrated and is to really just say, it's like, what are we going to do after this? Like, what are we really going to do after this mission is over? And so his father is to mention, it's like, well, we just go on another mission. And it's like, well, what after that? And then it's like, and that, and that. And what are we doing? What are we doing after that? And so Professor Bloom is to just basically say that we are to be the line in the sand or the last defense against all of these supernatural Esh-like characters. So it doesn't stop until either everything supernatural wise is to be wiped out, or like we're to basically just keep holding back all these monstrous things from unleashing, and so on and so forth. So Hellboy is just be like, God, this just never ends. Like how Hellboys have a story about when he had gotten to be 10 years old, his father had immediately gave him some gun to go off into um, some forest to shoot a pack of wild trolls. And so like even on Hellboy's birthday, like he can't get a day off from having to go and do some kind of mission or some kind of something. So he has been possibly doing this for a really long stretch of time. So Hellboy is to be sick of this, wanting to trudge off to make his way to just leave this place because he's just tired of doing this every day. There's never a break. There's never a time to mourn for the loss of many of his friends that have died every single day doing this, and so on and so forth. So Hellboy has just had enough. He goes in the elevator to try to leave, and or to try to go to his own little room or whichever, and so all of a sudden this elevator is malfunctioning, and so this elevator goes and takes him to a lower ground, which when this elevator is to open, it is to open to Baba Yaga's other dimension that she is being held in. And we have this white fogged like area that is to have seemingly Baba Yaga's house kind of floating from from these legs, and as if this is like a house that consistently moves around for whatever goofy reason. Hellboy goes into Baba Yaga's home quickly, of course, because her house starts moving again. And so we find out that Baba Yaga is in some adjacent dimension that Hellboy had been, because evidently she was trying to summon uh, Stalin's ghost from the Necropolis, whichever that is from. Maybe it's not the Necronomicon, but something close, right? And so, for that of which that Baba Yaga had done, or tried to do this, Hellboy had gone and taken one of her eyes from her and shot her in the eye to try and stop her, and put her, of course, in this other dimension. So, in uh, in trade for Baba Yaga giving Hellboy some information, Baba Yaga is to ask for Hellboy's eye, which Baba Yaga says Hellboy's eye is yellow, but I don't think it, like, is it really yellow? Like, to me, there's sometimes where it looks red, there's sometimes it looks yellow, sometimes it looks any number of colors. I think it mainly looks red through most of this movie, so I don't know what she was saying about his eye looks yellow like piss. So, but yeah, so they make this deal and weirdly seal it with a kiss, but it's some kind of long, goofy, she's using her tongue, and Hellboy's like, God, you have like hair on your tongue, and he's just like, "Mwah." After this whole like makeout session is over, and so Baba Yaga is to think that she's going to get the eye right then and there, and Hellboy's like, "No, I'm not done using my eye just yet. You're gonna get it when I decide to give it to you, because I still need it." And so Baba Yaga's like, "Ah, you tricked me." So Baba Yaga starts to attack Hellboy, but he of course eventually outstrengths her. So Baba Yaga's like, fine, keep your eye for a while. And to realize that Baba Yaga is going to come and collect it after a while, supposedly. So Baba Yaga gives Hellboy this information, and so Hellboy goes and drops from out of the sky to smash into Professor Bloom's table, which I thought was kind of a funny thing to do. And so Professor Bloom is like, "What? You don't even use doors anymore?" And so Hellboy ends up getting from out of this table, and he mentions that the Blood Queen is in Pendle Hill again, and that they're on the clock. They have until midnight because the Blood Queen is getting her power back, and so on and so forth. And so Hellboy is going and is making his own line in the sand, and so he's going off to go and do this mission. So, so now during this helicopter ride, end up finding out that what had happened to Ben to give him that scar upon his face. It seems that Ben had gone into a training exercise to Belize, where he was to go off to talk to some tribal elder who needed help in his certain forest-like location. And so we have these people almost predator-like, having Ben go and be the only last survivor because all of his other men were to be easily and quickly taken down by this seemingly jaguar-like creature, which we eventually figure out later that is to be a were-jaguar. Like, I don't know if that's to exactly be the actual title of this character, but I couldn't find anything else about it. And so we have it where Ben himself eventually, later on in this movie, becomes a were-jaguar. And I thought that actually was a good enough thing to put together, but it's just kind of weird. It kind of feels like they needed to do something different than just making him a werewolf or some kind of other, like, it also kind of feels like we did do like a vampire thing in this movie, so now we have to technically do a werewolf. Where is going to be the Frankenstein? Where is going to be the mummy? Where is all these things coming from eventually? Like, we technically have a Creature of the Black Lagoon at the end of this film, so they got to put up their own batch of things to put in here. So we have the Blood Queen, who of course is at her hill, and so she's going and getting all of her powers, and so all of the monsters that had gone underground had decided to all um, welcome back the Blood Queen by like showing their allegiance to her, and then are going to go off and kill everyone in this town that she is to be at. Because we have seemingly a number of demons, which eventually I'll get into at some point, that are to kill off a cluster of people in this town. Sadly enough. They're all randos, they're all extras, so who cares, right? So all of a sudden, the Blood Queen is to all of a sudden see her other witch peers or co-witches. And so the Blood Queen is to talk to Gandea, and mention that like the Blood Queen is going to go and wipe these three out, and the one Gandea girl is to ask for mercy. And the Blood Queen's like, did you guys show mercy? Like, did you guys go and help me go and like get back Humpty Dumpty back together? No, you guys didn't help me. Gregorsh did. And so, but Gregorsh in return is to ask for something, which I don't think he's ever really going to get. Because he just won't. Because I've seen this movie and he doesn't. So, so that transitions us to now having Hellboy, Ben, and Alice making their way to this hill also, but they end up getting a surprise by a number of zombies that just appear and are going and attacking these people. And so Hellboy is to go and run off to go and fight the Blood Queen, while both Alice and Daimio are to stay here and to fight off all these zombies. And so at first it seems that Ben is to tell Alice to get behind him when he has like kind of bullets lined up to go and attack these zombies, but then he runs out. So it seems that Alice has this power of punching souls out of monsters' bodies. And so Ben is to ask Alice, how in the heck do you have that power? And Alice is to mention that she had spent some time with the fairies, and now she can do all kinds of weird stuff. And so, like, we just weirdly have Alice who can do a number of these weird ability things and so on and so forth. So Hellboy makes it to the Blood Queen, but it seems that the Blood Queen is far too strong for Hellboy, and there are times where the Blood Queen just kind of knocks Hellboy away, or is to just kind of play with him and not take him down. And so the Blood Queen here, before she is to go into her portal and leave, she's to take this one little tree branch and go and chuck it into Allison's neck and have her fall over. And so supposedly this part here is to, I guess, have this girl start to have this plague being put into her body. And so now they're going to have to seek a cure. And so they, of course, still have the witch, who is Gwendea, who is there, that Hellboy is grabbing and saying, you need to correct this. You need to make this right within 3, 2... And so Gwendea is to mention there evidently is a cure from the old world, that they have to go to a place called Black Finn to find Merlin and open his coffin or his tomb or whatever and get him to cure this illness from of course, Alice. So they go off to this location, they rattle off all these directions and all these goofy things, And so they end up waking up Merlin, and so Merlin ends up going and curing Hellboy's friend Alice of her illness. But then Merlin goes and puts both Alice and Ben to sleep. And so Merlin goes and takes Hellboy and asks him, it's like, well, hey, like, do they still tell tales of King Arthur like in your time? And like Hellboy's like, yeah, like we do movies about him, we do all kinds of things, like, yeah, like, of course. So we find out that evidently King Arthur, they assumed at some point that King Arthur no longer had a bloodline, no longer had an heir of sorts. But we come to find out that that actually is wrong. That actually King Arthur's last heir is a woman named Sarah Bethany Hughes. And Sarah Bethany Hughes had went on to go and find this goat demon of sorts, and she went on to marry that demon, I guess, in some part of 1751, somewhere along those lines. And so that child of of course Sarah's produced a demonish, a half human, half demon character that was to be called Anung Un Rama, which of course is to be Hellboy. And so Hellboy is to now be said to be a descendant of King Arthur, but also a demon also. But so now Hellboy could go on to supposedly be the king of Britain if that's what he really wanted, I guess, because technically he is a descendant. So, it was 1574, evidently, was the year for whatever goofy reason. Um, but Hellboy is to be the descendant of the king of man, and so Merlin is to use his power to have Hellboy see Excalibur and to pull it from this stone. And so Hellboy is to go and touch Excalibur, because with the main thought or goal of defeating the Blood Queen. But Hellboy grabs onto it and is to have this vision of him wiping out the world, and like he hesitates. And so he decides to not take Excalibur, and we have Merlin who's to shout out, "You fool! Like, I had to use all my power to have you go and take this sword back." And now we just see Merlin just decay off and die. And so now we just forcibly transition ourselves to now having the Blood Queen going off, and wiping everyone off, uh, around around where she is to be at, around that hill, and she is putting the plague into everyone, killing everybody off. It seems that uh, like the news is mentioning that there is to be like of course, like a lockdown kind of going on. Everyone stay inside, because we don't know like where this plague, of course, is coming from. I don't even know why they called it a plague. They could have called it a sickness or an illness, because they weirdly end up calling it a plague, and that doesn't seem right to me that they would actually use that word, um, because so but we now transition Hellboy having to forcibly make it back to his headquarters, because also the Blood Queen went off and wiped out everyone uh, at the security headquarters. And so also the Blood Queen grabbed Hellboy's father and took him to this church of sorts to have this final big battle between Hellboy and Gregorsh and, of course, the Blood Queen. So Hellboy makes it back to this secret headquarters of theirs to find his father missing, and he naturally assumes that his father is dead. And so they're hearing all this news on the TV about this plague, and that hundreds of armed police continue to try and control this whole thing. There's so many demons and everything like that also running loose upon the town. And so now we transition to have Hellboy going off to this church to fight off a more steroid-like Gregorsh that seems to have iron not as a weakness. And so we also had it where at some point Professor Broom was to go and give Hellboy a different weapon in this film. I guess a much more substantial Samaritan, if a Samaritan wasn't something that he already had. So Hellboy goes off to fight Gregorsh, and it seems that both Alice and Ben, there's not much for them to do here, but there is to be this one kind of beam or some kind of structure or something that falls on Ben's leg. And so now he is to decide, instead of having to restrain himself from taking his suppressors to stop the whole were-jaguar from coming out, he decides instead that maybe he actually needs to become this were-jaguar to help out Hellboy. But also, while doing that, the were-jaguar helps Ben get his leg from out from under where that structure is. So Hellboy and Daimio are to team up now against Gregorsh, and they are to do a pretty good number on Gregorsh, but they don't exactly kill him off. And so now the Blood Queen is to just kind of stop all this and to basically just quickly kill off Gregorsh, because he's kind of ran out of his usefulness. And so she basically shrinks him down to a tiny baby and then wipes him out, because this character was never really going to get what exactly he wanted, and even though he went out of his way to help the queen, still he's gonna get killed. So we have here that let me think here. The Queen the Blood Queen showcasing to Hellboy that she had known where Arthur's tomb was all along, and where exactly Excalibur was all along. It was right underneath this church. So we have the Blood Queen going and tossing Hellboy through this one part of this building to showcase both King Arthur sitting on this throne and Excalibur there left in this stone. So now Hellboy is now tempted to whip out this Excalibur to go and kill the Blood Queen, because Blood Queen is to pretty much set up that that the Blood Queen and Hellboy are to be meant to be together, that they're meant to be a couple and destroy the world together. So now the Blood Queen is to go and take Professor Broom and to kind of just hold on to Professor Bloom, but to also just go and slice Professor Bloom's neck to kill him off, to try and say that Professor Bloom had lied to Hellboy, had kept a number of things from him, and so Professor Bloom is saying like the opposite. That's like, hey, don't trust this woman. Like, she's lying to you also. So, like, she's lying about what she really wants out of this relationship. So, so now while this is going on, we're also seeing a number of massive demons going and destroying the area around where this church is to be held. So we have this blade-handed demon going and slicing up certain people. We also have fire demons that are to go and like blaze up seemingly a number of this town. There's to be like also a number of just giant colossal demons going and destroying a bridge by just seemingly walking next to it weirdly, because like the demon doesn't even do much and this bridge just collapses. We also have some horned demon that just kind of just stomps on certain characters and just like has them collectively all over his legs for whatever reason, because he's just stomping through all of them weirdly. Supposedly the bridge was to be called a tower bridge for whatever reason. So eventually what happens is, after Professor Bloom is to die, of course, that is when Hellboy decides to go and take Excalibur, and he is to grow back his horns and to have now his crown upon his head to, of course, be among Unrama. I think I said that like incorrectly once before, but anyways, it is what it is. So now among Moonrama is standing in front of the Blood Queen, and she is to say, of course, it's like, well, like now, like you're to be at my side, and so on and so forth. And so Alice is trying to use a tactic to go and touch onto Hellboy's father, to channel Professor Bloom, to talk to Hellboy, to convince him to remember who he is. Like, it's kind of like that same exact spot from the first Hellboy movie, where we have that one agent having Hellboy needing to be convinced of, like, remember who you are, and he tosses the rosary to Hellboy, and so Hellboy grabs it and is to, like, have the cross burn in his hand. Same kind of moment repeats here, but with actually Professor Bloom. So now Hellboy is to go off and chop the head off of the Blood Queen, break off the horns, like of course we've seen in the very first film, and then go and take the Blood Queen's head grab it and just chuck it down this hole that was to be, of course, presented. Because once Hellboy was to chop off the Blood Queen's head, all of a sudden there was to be holes put in the world that was to drag all these demons back down, I'm assuming, to the underground, or I'm assuming back to hell where once they came. And so Hellboy goes and chucks the head of the Blood Queen into this hole to, I guess, neutralize this problem so that way she does not come back. So now we have Hellboy going and talking to his dad and having this one final goodbye, and Hellboy is like, you know what, I don't think that I can like do this without you. And like Professor Boom has like been training Hellboy to do this very thing, and that being his father was the best decision that he had ever made, and that like him saving him was also the best decision that he had ever made instead of shooting him and killing him off. And so like they're basically saying their goodbyes at this point. And so uh so after that moment, Alice is to ask Hellboy, it's like, well, I guess you're the king of Britain now. And Hellboy's like, sure, yeah. I'm sure they're just gonna let me in and just be the king of Britain. I'm sure that's gonna work out. So now we transition at the end of this film to go to Siberia of all places. So now we go to Siberia to have Hellboy, Alice, and Ben fighting off these guys named the Owns Society, the OANNES Society. And supposedly these guys are to be much more of a threat than the Osiris Club. And so Alice is just be frustrated. It's like, why is it that all these like men's societies are just, or men's clubs are just cropping up like this? And Hellboy's like, I don't know. Like, dude, I'm just killing them off. Who cares, right? You would probably have assumed that maybe this society would have bleeded into the sequel movie, but I guess not. So, really, what is to happen here is that Hellboy is to force now Daimio to change into his were-cheetah to go and fight all these guys off. And so Ben is like, dude, I can't just turn it off and on like a switch, which is almost kind of what he can technically do here. But, to each their own. Um, so Hellboy then starts punching and beating him up, and then he starts to change into the were-jaguar, and so they go off and they start blasting through all these guys in these weird Breaking Bad like gas masks and weird goofy attire to eventually find out at the end of this that the real prize that they are to find here is they end up finding uh, Ichio Sapien, which is actually Abe Sapien or Abraham Sapien. And so that is to basically give us Abe from, of course, the original Hellboy movie, where we only just have Sapien's hand that it just appears on screen, and that's it. So, uh, so now we are to go on to the end credit scenes and to wrap up this movie. Man, this movie I think was like 2 hours and 50 minutes, and I'm almost getting 2.5 hours out of this. Good grief. Now, so the end credit scene is to reintroduce us to, of course, the goofy lobster character, where Hellboy's be at this graveyard, I guess, talking to his dad and kind of just talking about his cases and whatever. And we just have this lobster character coming back as a ghost to Hellboy and just telling him like, "Hey man, like get back to work, like get back on the horse," and so on and so forth. And so Hellboy is like, "Oh my god, the lobster! I'm such a big fan of yours." Like, and the lobster is like, "Well, yeah, I'm sure you want to see like the claw, right? The hand, right?" And so Hellboy's like, "Yeah," and so he shows it to him. It's like, "Great!" So this guy ends up walking off, and so Hellboy's like, "Oh my god, that was like such a like an amazing thing I saw there. Like, wow, that like." You would have thought probably at that point, like this guy would have just been like the guy, the actor would have just been so sarcastic at this moment, just like, yeah, like nothing's gonna ever come out of this. So the end, the like, because we have bizarrely two end credit scenes from this movie. So the last end credit scene, of course, is to be Baba Yaga going on and talking to a new threat that is to, of course, be in a sequel movie of Hellboy that never happens. And so it's kind of a meaningless thing to talk about, but like I guess Baba Yaga was setting something up for no reason. I'm assuming they're probably not going to bring back Baba Yaga in another Hellboy movie, anyways. So we're not going to know what the cliffhanger thing of this movie is. So with that said, I think I'm going to cliffhangerly get the heck out of here. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.